afternoon and welcome to everybody joining us here for the PPMA Lunch and Learn series. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be joined by Simon Payne. Simon describes himself as an L&D punk and is the person who created Punk Incorporated. And I came across the content of Punk Incorporated, really by chance. It's one of the great things of lockdown. It's enabled me to have a little bit of space just to see what else is going on around the world, and saw the brand, we've talked a lot about the importance of personal brand, but also business brand. And it was hugely compelling. So therefore I connected with Simon. So here he is. I've managed now to get him onto the program. So Simon, welcome. It's great to have you on board.
Thank you very much. Absolutely delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
So before we kind of get off and talk about HRE punk stuff, a question that I've been asking people throughout the series is something to do with how people have been coping or what they found about themselves during lockdown. But because I've got music in my head, and whenever I see your brand, I always think punk music. I don't know why, but that's where I go. So I'm going to ask you, what track have you been, if any, have you been drawn to during this period of lockdown that you keep returning to?
There's from a pure punk perspective, there's a band called Discharge who did a song many years ago called Decontrol, and it's a song about waking up and realizing that we've got to not stand for the status quo, which kind of sums me up a bit. And when I think about some of the politics that we've seen during the lockdown, when I think about how people have coped in various different ways, for me it was about actually facing it head on. I knew I was going to have my moments up and down, like everybody, which I did, but really it was this song Decontrol, which was about, right, I'm not going to stand for this anymore. I'm taking it by the scruff of the neck, if you like.
Well, I certainly like the sentiment. I haven't heard of the band or the track, so I'll have a listen and we'll put it onto the website and see whether or not it's going to make the PPMA conference playlist. Right. You just never know. Yeah, last year I can't remember if I shared the theme of our gala dinner was Rock the Casbah.
Oh, brilliant!
So, I decided to take that as the song Rock the Casbah, and so I had my Mohican, bleached blonde Mohican, and my kind of homage to punk. Most other people, of course, took it as Rock the Casbah, i.e., the Moroccan experience. So
I see.
that just shows there's always more than one way to view things and see what's in the label. So what brought you to create something like Punk Incorporated? Where did the idea come from and how did it emerge?
I think I've had quite a long career, and much of that was sort of commercial. In work, I worked for Sainsbury's for a long time. I then set my own business up, running a team building company for many years with a colleague of mine. And when that naturally came to an end, I kind of drifted in and out of full-time work, contracting work. And I think I got to the end of 2018 and I didn't have a sense of who I really was. I turned 50. That was a bit of a milestone because I started thinking, well, do I really know who I am and what I stand for? Where do I want to go for the next part of my life? What's that look like? And as I began to challenge myself more, I began to realize that actually what I wanted to be was me. And every role I'd been in, I felt I was putting myself in a box. So I really wasn't being 100% me. Okay, we usually say you can't always be in an organization, but I wanted to sort of break out. I wanted my tattoos out. I wanted to feel like I was doing something. And then when I looked around at my world of learning and development, I was a little bit frustrated. And there's some brilliant things happening, don't get me wrong. But equally, I was quite frustrated how a lot of it, we're stuck in the past, stuck in old models and theories from the 60s and certain ways of presenting training. And I just was getting more frustrated. So I began to kick against it a little bit. And say, you know, I'm not happy with the way things are. I think we need a new way forward. I think we need a new set of values and things to work towards to really push on. And to my surprise, when I come up with a punk brand, it resonated with people, and it's enabled me to have a different kind of voice in the marketplace, I think, to say, no, we're going to challenge the status quo. And look, if I can do it, if I can be me, so can you. So that's kind of where it came from, I suppose.
So one of the values that you have in your list of punk values is about being yourself. You know, I really liked the quote you used by Oscar Wilde: "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." So how easy do you think it is to be that true version of yourself at work?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The how, it's easy to say be yourself, you know, from my perspective, because that's what I've worked, that's what I am. But how easy is it? Well, it's taken me actually a long time to get here. You know, as I said, I'm 50 years old now. So it's been a journey of discovery. And I think that's where you need to start with being yourself. How well do you know yourself? Are you really clear on your values and what's important to you? Do you know what your skills and competencies really are? Do you know what you love doing or you don't like doing? Okay. So it's very much that you've got to start with you. So when I say be yourself, the start of the journey is understand yourself. Okay. What do you stand for? What don't you stand for? Okay. What does authentic mean to you? Because from some people, probably like myself and you, Lethem, we like to be quite transparent, quite out there, and we're happy with that, but not everyone's like that. So it's learn to be yourself by first understanding yourself. And when I coach people, when I do training, that's where we start. We start at the beginning. Which is talking about values and what you stand for, what you like doing, what you don't like doing. So yeah, that's kind of part.
So how do you see that kind of playing out for people at the early part of their career? Because of course, the world of PPMA colleagues, you know, public sector, you know, very traditional often in the, you know, the perception of how people think people behave there. And I know from my own experience, you know, kind of being confident in who I am, a gay man, you know, I'm very colorful, I'm very, you know, it's not that I'm loud as a person, but I'm very, you know, I've got views and opinions and I want to be able to share them. And people talk about diversity and inclusion, but of course, when you get into the kind of the pack, the tribe, you know, and you're slightly different, even if you're not trying to be different, that can sometimes jar in business and be potentially career limiting as well as career liberating. So how have you seen that played out with the people you're working with?
I guess there's that phrase, how much do you want to play the game? So you go into a business, you know, where do you want to be in the long run? What's going to be important to you? Because actually, if you think about it, even from an early stage in our early careers when we're a bit younger, we still have a reasonably clear sense of who we are. What we don't understand is business. So my view on that is we have to sort of grow in our commercial business understanding. We've got to get those skills before we can begin to influence using our personality and our behaviors. And so I would say it's a bit of a balanced approach, perhaps early on. But as you get older, and perhaps when you're more experienced, well, maybe you need to challenge that a bit more. You know, are you playing a role? Are you pretending to be somebody you're not? And overall, what's the effect of that? Because it doesn't mean we all have to be all these wild characters like me, you know, challenging the status quo and, you know, constantly saying, no, I disagree with this and all full of ideas, because we're not all like that. But I would say early on, more of a balanced approach. Think about how you grow yourself, how you learn to be part of a business and grow into that level of influence so that you can begin to shape your direction a little bit more. But then I would definitely say, if you're not being yourself, you know, and you're just being a version of that, and that has an impact on you personally, I think you need to look at it. I think you need to challenge it a bit.
Yeah, that's great. It connects very much with the themes that we share in the talent programs that we run through PPMA. We start, you know, with colleagues right at the beginning of their career with the apprentice program. A group want to watch early starts in your HR profession and rising stars. And one of the things we're trying to encourage people to do is have their voice with confidence. So it picks up on another one of your values, which is about, be anti-okay, because it's much easier in the world, isn't it, just to kind of sit back and let things wash around you. I've never been able to kind of be in that space very long myself, but this is why the status quo just continues to drift. And what is it that you feel that we could be doing in the HR profession to be better at encouraging our organizations to be kind of anti-okay?
There's two sides of it. There's the anti-okay from an organizational level perspective, and then there's a personal anti-okay, which is your own. So it's both about the status quo again. It's your personal status quo. What are you doing that you know you could be doing better? Okay. And when you put your mind to it, you know you're doing it. You know it. You know there's things you think, oh, just get away with that. Or that relationship I've got with someone in the organization, I don't invest in it. So but it doesn't matter. You start identifying those things and not accepting okay as good enough. And I think from an organizational perspective, we need to be encouraging more of a culture of ideas and problem solving and opening that up. Say, look, there are better ways to do things. Are we inviting ideas? Are we inviting the bright sparks to tell us where some of the processes, some of the methodologies, some of the ways we work are just okay and they can be better. But of course, from a leadership perspective, from the people who run the business, they've got to be open to that. So again, we need to be encouraging a more innovative approach to what we do. Now, in the people services, not always easy, but when we're talking about budgets, when we're talking about people's money, well, there's a way to sell it, if you like. So that's kind of where I think anti-okay fits in personally, and there's also an organizational side to it as well.
Yeah, and of course that also when you're trying to challenge status quo, some things, I always like to talk about experimenting, because then at least something will happen. It doesn't mean to say it's not labeled with right or wrong or perfection or imperfect. It's just about trying something to see where it goes, and it leads you down a different route. Perhaps you end up doing something which is not how you intended, but it creates something amazing. But often people can be quite fearful because of that sense of judgment, and therefore it's okay. I call it about failing happy. I think your language and the values you use is about being wrong and confident about being wrong. I don't know whether that's something different you're trying to explain, or it connects with that. But it'll be interesting to know why you felt it's important for people to be confident or comfortable in being wrong.
Yeah, it's be wrong. It's being prepared to be wrong. Okay, so this is about being prepared to be vulnerable. I think is a key part of this, which is what I found is that people have, like you say, have a general fear of being wrong. Maybe it's linked to their general success. Maybe they don't want to be told off. They don't want to get it wrong. Whereas actually what happens when you open up yourself, when you open up an idea and say, look, I don't know. What do you think? We begin to knock on different doors here. So being wrong is a vulnerable choice, which I know can be difficult for people. However, when you start seeing the benefits of saying, I don't know, what do you think? Is there a better way to do this? It becomes much, much easier. But it is a choice. It's definitely a choice that we've got to learn to do as well. It might not be easy. I've been working with a leadership team at the moment, and we've been talking about change products. So they've got some enormous change projects on the go, and they have an element of there's an element of risk associated with those. So they just keep pushing on and pushing on and pushing on. I said, well, at what point do you involve other people to make sure the success of it is more likely, even if it means you being wrong? And it opens up the mind, think, okay, I see where you're going with this. Actually, maybe we'll have a greater degree of success if we involve people and I admit that I don't have all the answers.
Yeah, And that space of, being vulnerable and admitting you might not have all of the answers. I've been quite taken when you watch the play out of how things have unfolded through lockdown, and that, for example, our politicians, are expected to be right all of the time, every day they stand in front of the camera, and seem to get a real kind of barraging of criticism if perhaps they say, well, actually, we didn't necessarily get it right. We're dealing with something that we've never experienced before at a pace and a scale that is unprecedented. And yet when they show some vulnerability in certain quarters, that seems to be really quite badly attacked in terms of, well, you're leading the country and therefore we expect you to know everything all of the time immediately. And of course, no doubt you show that, I don't know, maybe you might have a different opinion in terms of what you've seen, but it's that sense of vulnerability, which of course immediately forces people back into that defensive state.
Yeah.
Rather than kind of listening to the reality of what's happening. I don't know, how have you found that, or what's your observations been?
Well, I guess one of the real highlights of that was the Dominic Cummings debacle. Now, when he admitted he was wrong, okay, so he did that lengthy interview, but what I noticed, and what I did a piece on LinkedIn about it actually, was often people will admit they're wrong, but it almost seems like under duress. They don't show enough empathy to show they understand why people are feeling the way they do. Why are they challenging this? How is it impacting them? And so if you are wrong, have you understood the impact of that on people, on individuals, on lives? And if you can demonstrate you understand, you can put yourself in their shoes, you can show that level of empathy, people are more likely to accept it and say, okay, fair enough. But if you don't show that, it's just words. And we're too clever. We as human beings, we know. So I think what you see with the attacks on the government when they get things wrong is, well, some of it's genuine mistakes. No, it wasn't genuine. It's mistakes they shouldn't have made. But some of it is, did they show enough empathy? Have they really understood what we're feeling and what we're going through here? Do they understand the impact on people's lives? And I haven't seen enough evidence of that. So I think that's why we get the reaction we do.
What have you been seeing through the people that you've worked with in terms of leaders trying to step into their own world of business to share their own vulnerability and seek information in terms of how can we do things better from the people they're leading? And what kind of support have you had to give to enable people to show their vulnerability in this space?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question. I've been working with a group who have, like many organisations, day one, they've all had to start working from home. And the initial conversations, I'm working with 12 different sort of heads of department. And the initial conversations I was having with them was, we're completely overwhelmed. We've got no time. Our productivity's gone down. And I said, well, why? What's happening? And actually, they'd almost gone too far with the empathy. They wanted to be there for people. Got to be there for people. This is a really difficult time. And so what they were doing is they were almost overcompensating in trying to support and be everything to everyone at the detriment to their own performance, their own health, their own behaviours, and their own productivity. So what I worked with them on was some of the basics, like delegation, time management. I mean, it sounds simple, but these are the things I had to reintroduce so that they could get some time back and then realize when they did need to spend time and support people, it was in the right way. So yeah, that was a bit of a surprise to me. I didn't think the overwhelm would be because we're supporting people too much, but that was definitely the case early on. We're now in a position where I think they've all settled down a bit, and I've certainly had some really lovely comments recently about how I've enabled people to have a work-life balance, because that was another big part of it. Being stuck at home, your laptop's on your desk, on the kitchen table, it's always there, isn't it? So you just keep checking it, you keep going back to it. So I've had to introduce them and say, you can switch it off, you know.
Yeah.
At 5 o'clock, you can close the lid. You can physically walk away. So yeah, the work-life balance, the overwhelm, it's taken an element of giving people more awareness that the tools are there to support them through that. And because a lot of these problems come from people just really caring.
Yeah. Yes. It's taken my mind to another one of your values, and I love the simplicity of language. It's that they're all very accessible. So this one is about, putting out the bullshit, and it's not the kind of thing that you would ordinarily have up there on your wall. I don't know, some organizations might, and certainly from my experience, that's not, and yet that's what people talk about. We hear so much bullshit all of the time, and we just want to get, people talking about it. And one of the references you make around, bullshit is to do with habits, but also and how job titles can get in the way. And in my world of being an HR director, the three things which dominated my time. This may say something in terms of my own inabilities, but it was office accommodation, job titles, and car parking. They were always constantly the things which drove me insane and dominated my inbox for the 15 years I was around an organization. Other stuff was quite periphery, and yet the heated debate, certainly around what we call people, and this is my job title, so I can't do this. But the world I started working in, which was, I was a wedding planner for Scottish and Newcastle breweries, and it didn't matter what job description or job title you had, and if somebody had been sick in the toilets on a Saturday night in Newcastle, it had to be cleaned up, whether you were the manager or the cleaner. It's just who was available to clean it. And I always have found this kind of concept of job titles really limiting the ability to kind of operate as communities.
Yeah.
So I'd be intrigued to find out a little bit more just in terms of what led you to kind of promote this concept of cutting out the bullshit.
I use the phrase stop a lot in coaching and training, not in a harsh way, but stop for a second and think. Stop for a second and take a breath. Okay, because we're all running at 100 miles an hour. And stop and think about the other person. It doesn't take long. We've got these amazing brains. We can flick a switch just like that. Stop. And when it comes to bullshit, I ask people to stop and think about where they can identify it. Because it's not nice, but we all do it. We're all doing things we think, oh God, I'm going to do that again. I'm going to say that in that meeting, or I'm going to do this again. And I know I shouldn't do it, but I'm going to do it anyway. Why? Well, you're not challenging yourself. So booting out the bullshit is it's two parts to it. It's, again, this is when I do a leadership development program, it's got to become a cultural thing. So one is you need to start looking at the bullshit that you're working within. Sometimes it's within your role because you think that's how we do things around here. And if you've learnt it from somebody else who appears to have a relevant amount of success based on that bullshit, you think it's okay. So you don't question it. So we leech from people and we leech the bad habits. And ultimately they start having a poorer effect. And we think, well, why it worked for them? Why doesn't it work for me? Because you're not being true to yourself. You're trying to do what someone else, you're trying to be someone else. You're trying to be the role. Okay, don't. So you've got to start looking at that. But equally, and this is the harder part, is it's calling each other out on the bullshit. So that's saying, that's not you. We don't need to do that around here. Let's not do it. It's a tougher one, but definitely seeing it at the moment, working with the group I'm currently working with. Because what we're doing with the values is we're improving the conversations. We're improving the common language they have amongst themselves to be able to do that in a way that isn't inflammatory. We're not saying that's bullshit, you're pointing at people, and what we're saying is, have we really thought about this the right way? Is that the best idea? Can we not build on this a little bit? The conversation we're having isn't really going to get us anywhere. So that's what I mean by built out bullshit. It's not actually calling it out and pointing at it and being aggressive. It's culturally saying, why do we what's the benefit to it? Where's it taking us as individuals? Where's it taking us as teams? Where's it taking us as an organization? When you begin to focus on it and look at it, you realize it's like mud. It gets in the way, or it's like shit. So when we're just trawling through it, clean it up.
So I like that. And my mind got kind of stuck at stop. So I flipped immediately away from punk to Spice Girls and pop. Yeah. And their song Stop. And also, of course, they were seeking the human touch, which of course is, you know, what I kind of like about this.
Yeah.
So there's always something great that you can find in terms of your inspiration in a song. And yeah, I mean, it's a great message, I think, for people, you know, to be able to, especially calling out, you know, behavior in an organization which is not great, but doing it in a way which, you know, is done with genuine kindness and open-heartedness. You know, it doesn't mean to say that people have got to be adversarial about it, but we can all lose track and all lose our way in terms of the way that we behave. And we can always, of course, be better versions of the people we want to be in the workplace. I think, you know, looking at our own behavior certainly as a starting point, I think is hugely important there. So I'm just mindful of our time, and I could go on chatting for a lot longer with you. But I just want to end with, of course, you talk about the, you know, the pace of change in the VUCA world, and we've touched on that previous webinars here. But the last one is about taking, you know, that responsibility, accountability for our own development. And what have you seen, if anything, in terms of how people have been doing that over the past 4 months or so? Have you seen any kind of step back from that, or have people been very mindful in terms of how they're coping and developed throughout this time?
I think what's jumped out at me over the past 4 months is about how we motivate ourselves. So I think what we're seeing is that a lot of people working from home, some people are desperate to get back in the office, and I totally understand that, but others are working quite well. We've reached a point where if you're working from home now, you're actually reached a level of normalcy, and that intrinsic motivation to do a good job, to work hard, I think that's really begun to shine. That people don't need to be looked at, they don't need to be micromanaged. We don't need to be looking over their shoulders all the time. So how do we work with that? How do we work with that intrinsic motivation people have got? They're managing their own time. They're managing their workload better. They may be even performing better. So we need to definitely think about how we work with that. And then I think from a development perspective, I found people have been fairly open, actually, and they do want to listen and learn. But I think the important part in the DIY, you know, for flip's sake, is it's about discipline. So what are the conversations I'm having is, wow, we really need this. We need to learn about change more. We want to learn about delegation and having difficult conversations, especially at this challenging time. But what I'm finding I'm having to do is the key learnings are jumping out at them. But what I'm having to introduce is the discipline. Make the connection between thinking about how it's going to work, applying it, and turning it into those good habits. So I think that's what we need to be better at. I think the appetite is there, I think, to learn, especially right now, especially with the way the future's going. But I think we need to support them more and more on applying it practically and learning to be more committed to it.
So that brings us to the end of our program for today. I mean, it's great to have been able to introduce you to you know, my community of HR professionals here in PPMA. It's fantastic. I love the vibrancy that you bring to the world of learning and development, you know, and that whole concept of being more punk, certainly in a world where we're going to really need to be encouraging organizations not to go back to how things were. You know, it'd be really easy to see kind of a different dust cover on a book where the narrative is just the same in reality and lived experience for many. So it's kind of been a revolution that's happened just you know, by chance. And those kind of qualities of, you know, the punk energy to actually keep with it, and the bravery and the courage to stand out for all of the right reasons, you know. And punk, just to finish, Simon, what is it that punk actually stands for? PUNK.
what does it stand for? For me, it's it's the disruption, it's the individuality, it's kicking against the status quo. Why? It means better. That's what the original punks thing, they wanted to express themselves and say, we can have something better here. There's better ahead. We'll forge it ourselves if you won't give it to us. And that's what they did. And that's what I want from people. I want us to grab hold of it and say, look, you know, let's kick it up the arse. Let's do it. We can do it. We're ready for it. I think we're ready for a revolution. It's a good word. It's time to move forward. It's not always going to be easy. Revolutions aren't, but it is time. And that's why punk has been born, to help those people who want to be part of it.
Fantastic. So we've got all of Simon's details on our website. There's also an amazing video. It's about 6 minutes long. I love it, in terms of kind of giving you a brief overview in terms of all of the qualities that we've been touching on a little bit more detail today. So check that out on Simon's website. And anything else that you need, please get in touch with us and we can pass on messages to Simon direct, or feel free to contact him on his contact info button that you'll find. So on Monday, we've got the Lunch and Learn series returning. So I hope that I'll see you again next week. And the daily mindfulness sessions are going to be starting off again, and Karen's going to be leading on those, and further information to follow. And just remember, if you haven't already booked your place for the virtual conference, which is on the 15th and 16th of September, tickets are now available. So I hope that I'll see many of you there. And in the meantime, wishing you a very happy, healthy, and weekend full of sunshine and love and laughter. And huge thanks, Simon, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye, everyone.
Bye.